It's a late night and you've just checked into your hotel, so you make your way to your room, set your stuff down, and start getting ready for bed. And because you're generally a curious person, you also kind of poke around the room a bit and end up opening the bedside table. You're not surprised to see the Gideon Bible because you've seen that in hotel rooms before, but today you notice that there's a second book next to the Bible, and it says on the cover, "The Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ." That's because you're not staying in any old hotel, you are staying in a Marriott. And if you want to fact check me, then the next time you happen to be in a Marriott, check the bedside table just to see that I am telling the truth. If you've seen this before and you have personal experience, please feel free to drop a comment, because I think that most people don't realize that they're being proselyted to in the world's biggest hotel chain. Marriott is a company started by Mormons, and both the Marriott company and the Marriott family have very long history and ties with the Mormon Church. And as you can see from this screenshot from LDS Living, which is a magazine owned by the Mormon Church, they call them the Mega Mormon Marriott family. The name Marriott has been connected with Mormons since long before anyone started a hotel, because there is the Marriott settlement in Utah, and that is where John Willard Marriott was born in 1900. He was born into a large Mormon family as the second of 8 children. He also served a Mormon mission in New England. He started many different businesses and companies throughout his life, and even though he was born into a farming family, he ended his life as a ultra-rich man. At the time of his death, the Marriott Corporation had $3.5 billion in total annual sales, and you better believe that 10% of Marriott's income went directly to the Mormon Church. As I was researching for this video, I discovered that one of the most famous Mormons, Mitt Romney, who was up against Obama to become president, Mitt Romney was actually named after John Willard Marriott, because Mitt is only his middle name. His first name is Willard. I grew up as a very devout Mormon kid, and so the name Marriott is very familiar to me. I have lots of memories about my parents talking about the Marriott family or the hotels. When I went to Brigham Young University, I would walk past the Marriott School of Business. Here's a picture of the building, and as you can see, it's pretty big. It has this big open air center, all of the different flags of all the different countries, and by comparison, it's definitely one of the largest and most opulent buildings on BYU campus, and I'm comparing that with where I would go to classes, which is why I remember it with some bitterness, because I would walk past the business building and see, just how beautiful and large and awesome the building looked, and then I would go to my classes, which were in the School of Education, which was kind of like a shoebox in comparison to the business school, and I always felt frustrated by this kind of quiet assertion of the values of the two schools. Like, the business students get this awesome building, and the education students, which are arguably doing something very, very important by educating the future of America, we get the shoebox. The reason that the Marriott name is on the business school is because of a donation that happened in 1988. In that year, the Marriott Foundation gave a $15 million gift to BYU. The business school is not the only building that bears the Marriott name, though. We also have the Marriott Center. This is basically where the BYU basketball games happen. This is also where I would go to the weekly devotional. And so 2 of the most prominent buildings on the campus have the name Marriott. The University of Utah also has the J. Willard Marriott Library. And so obviously the Marriott family has invested heavily and given a lot of money to these different educational institutions. Now, if you're Mormon, you probably already know that the Marriotts are Mormon. You probably already understand this connection between this family and this religion. I think outsiders sometimes are surprised to find out about this connection. And the reason and the way they find out about it is because they open their hotel side drawer and they discover a Book of Mormon, which for a lot of people is the first time they've ever interacted with anything like this. The situation with the Book of Mormon in your side table is something that started in the 1950s with the very first ever Marriott hotel. Even though the founder of Marriott died in 1985, the family still has very close ties with the church, and the tradition of putting copies of the Book of Mormon into the hotel rooms still continues onward to this day. Even as Marriott buys into new hotel chains, when they acquire a new hotel chain or a new franchise, they typically write into the franchising agreements that they will carry copies of the Book of Mormon into the new hotel chain. For example, in 2016, Marriott acquired a company called Starwood, and And after acquiring that, they moved copies of the Bible and the Book of Mormon into about 300,000 different hotel rooms. I also think it's interesting that while the Bibles are covered completely by the Gideon Foundation, the copies of the Book of Mormon are covered by both the Mormon Church and by the Marriott Foundation. So they get the Bibles for free, but the Marriott Foundation itself is proactively purchasing and helping to fund copies of the Book of Mormon in all of these rooms. Today I'm going to react to videos people have put online on TikTok or Instagram of them encountering copies of the Book of Mormon in their hotel room. I'll also share the Mormon side of the history of Marriott. I'll share some snippets of articles like this which show a different side of the squeaky clean Mormon family image that Marriott worked very hard to maintain over the years. We'll also discuss how ultra-Mormon values sometimes clashed with the hotel chain, specifically around adult videos and with alcohol. I'm also going to call into a few different Marriott hotels and just ask them why they have the Book of Mormon, because I'm curious what the kind of public relations response is if someone asks, what is the Book of Mormon doing in my hotel room? If you haven't already, don't forget to brew up your own cup of devil's bean juice. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel. If you have a story about encountering a Book of Mormon in the wild in a Marriott, please feel free to share it in the comments below. I'm very excited to see how many people have encountered this phenomenon. I also saw a lot of people saying like it's not true that Marriott does this. I think that people who think that are just not curious enough to have opened their bedside table, because as someone who has known this factoid for most of my life, if I've ever happened to be in a Marriott, I always check the side table, and I found one in the side table every single time without fail. So drop a comment if you have an experience surrounding this topic. I also have a separate Patreon video posted where I wrote in the front cover of a Book of Mormon that was in a Marriott. This is a common practice of ex-Mormons to write in the cover of the Book of Mormon that you might find in your hotel side table. I'll talk about that in a bit, but I also made a separate Patreon video where I participated in this ex-Mormon trend. It's already posted if you want to see that. I'm going to share in a bit some of the videos of other people responding or reacting to finding a Book of Mormon in their side table. Personally, how I feel about this is, I know it's not like that big of a deal. I think my biggest beef with this is that you're putting a religious text in a private space. So a hotel room is a place where you're going to sleep. You want some privacy from the world, and something about having it in the side table does feel intrusive to me. Really, any religious text, it feels like this should be a place where these types of forces, like having someone proselyte to you, that shouldn't happen, I think, in a place where you're also going to sleep. I think a lot of people feel like this. This is why a lot of hotels are removing religious texts from hotel rooms, because I think a lot of people feel like, hey, if I want a Bible, I'll bring my Bible. Or I can go buy one. A lot of hotels now, instead of putting a Bible in the hotel room, they might write in the welcome notes or something, if you'd like any religious texts, we can provide any religious text from the front desk. But something about having it in the room where you expect privacy and discretion does feel like an overreach to me. Obviously, they're allowed to do it. Obviously, Marriott or any other hotel chain can put anything they want in the room. It's not against the law, but it does feel invasive to me. I think past the invasiveness of having a religion subtly present in your hotel room, I also think purely that the Book of Mormon is a objectionable text. In the book, it says that if people are not righteous, that their skin turned black. That's a storyline in the Book of Mormon, that as people chose to reject Jesus Christ and his gospel, that God placed a curse on them, which was a skin of blackness, which I'll put that verse off to the side here. It's also a violent book. Within the first few pages, we see God commanding Nephi to cut off someone's head because if he doesn't cut off his head, then an entire nation will dwindle in unbelief. And so even in the first few pages, it's like God is literally telling his servant Nephi to kill someone and to take his clothing and take his sword and be deceptive and commit murder. And it's just like, it ratchets up really quick as far as the violence goes, and even just the subtle messaging of the idea that God is commanding someone to kill someone. It's also a sexist book. There are are 330 men named in this book and only six women. They gave us 6 women. Thanks, Joseph Smith, for the 6 women. And I'll say the Bible has a lot of the same criticisms. There's also a lot of objectionable content in the Bible. I think even if they were to put the Book of Mormon and Bible in a less prominent place, maybe in the closet or somewhere, but having it in the side table right next to where you sleep, so it's just right there. Even the placement is too close for comfort for me. In this article from 2018 titled "Oh Holy Nights," they really got creative with that one, but they asked for a statement as to why the Book of Mormon is present in Marriott hotel rooms, and the statement was, "There are many guests who are not digitally connected who appreciate having one or both of these books available. It is a tradition appreciated by many, objected to by few." To me, that statement is like a little eye-rolly for me. It's like they don't even speak to, okay, well, but why not the Quran? Why not any other religious text? It's like they don't even speak to why those 2 books over other books. Why not just like give us a selection of books? The 2 books they give us are very specific. It's not just like they're providing general reading material for the digitally unengaged. They chose to provide those books for a reason, but they're not giving the reason. It's very mealy-mouthed, and it feels a little sneaky to me. To me, if you're gonna put a Book of Mormon in my hotel room, say it with your chest, explain it more clearly, like why it is you're choosing to do this. This statement to me is so vague that it feels like they don't actually want to say why it is, which is because Marriott was founded by a Mormon. He had very strong belief in the Mormon church. He wanted to share his beliefs with anyone staying in his hotel. They don't speak to any of that history with this statement. They're just like, well, most people enjoy it and only a few object to it. Now, with a lot of these types of situations, one of the most common questions I get is, does it actually work? That's probably the most common question I got on my video about serving a Mormon mission, is like, is it worth it? Like, how many converts are they actually getting from this? And at least for the Book of Mormon in the side table situation, I did find this Reddit thread, which is at least, anecdotal evidence that it did work for some people. The title is "Conversion from Hotel Book of Mormon." It says, "At the dinner table tonight, one of my kids was asking about the Books of Mormon that are found in nearly all Marriott chain hotel rooms. I actually haven't visited them all, so I can't verify. The question came up basically if anyone knew anyone that was baptized as a result of this and if it actually worked." So there are 27 comments on this and maybe 5 or 6 people who are chiming in to say that it worked for them. For example, this person says, "I visited a visitor center with my girlfriend in 1990. On the way home, my motorcycle broke down. I got a room that had a Book of Mormon in the nightstand. I did some reading. I was baptized later that year." So at least for that person, it did work, and I'll link that Reddit thread below if you want to go read through a few other examples. I also found this video. In this video, this person says that they joined the church as a result of finding a copy of the Book of Mormon in their bedside table at a Marriott. He now seems to be an influencer for the church. He has 52,000 followers. It says, "Inspiring Latter-day Saint, #BYU, gay convert following Christ." And so obviously with this Book of Mormon in the Marriott situation, they did at least get, a few people who converted and this person who became a Mormon influencer as a result. Now, because we don't have any real statistics on this, it's obviously impossible to test this claim that they made in the statement, which is that it's appreciated by many, objected to by few. Clearly, we have the Reddit thread and people saying, "Hey, it worked for me. I'm happy that this happened." I found other videos that we'll watch of people saying, "I object to this." One example that I got served it a while ago and I couldn't find it, but the guy basically had opened his side table and the Book of Mormon was on top of the Bible. And he was like, "Guess what I found on top of the Bible?" And it was a little melodramatic because it's okay. I don't think the Book of Mormon is going to squash the Bible, but the idea that it was placed on top seemed to be an even greater offense than the fact that it was there to begin with. Here's a video on TikTok of what this person did when they found the Book of Mormon.
All right, I'm staying at a Marriott hotel, wanted to check the end table, and lo and behold, Book of Mormon But the problem is, whoever cleaned this room last put it in the wrong spot. There's a special place in every Marriott hotel that this is supposed to go. It's right over here. It's right here. Down with false doctrine.
So, I guess he's one of the few that objected in this case. We also have this one, 25,000 likes. It says, POV, you're staying at a hotel in Utah, and she pulls a copy of the Book of Mormon out of her side table. She also uses the hashtag Real Housewives of Salt Lake, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I think she thinks that the Book of Mormon is in the side table purely because she's in Utah. This is something that exists throughout the United States at most Marriott hotels. It's not a Utah thing. Though I did see another comment of somebody saying that they carried copies of the Book of Mormon around with them, and they would put them in side tables whenever they would stay at hotels that weren't Marriott. So there's a chance that maybe people are doing that in Utah more than we even realize. In this next video, I learned a fact that I actually didn't know before, but I also encountered a lot in my research. So let's watch this next video.
So I'm from Utah. I grew up super Mormon, and every time I stay in a Marriott, I always go and look in the drawer. In case you didn't know, Marriott, the company, is owned by Mormons, and so in every single drawer in every room next to the Bible is a Book of Mormon. One of the first things I do when I come into the room is I go and open the Book of Mormon. And it's not because I'm a Mormon, because I'm super gay. It's because a lot of the times you will find something inside of them. And tonight, I found it. Well, let me show you. Hell yeah.
So he finds cash, and apparently there's a trend where people will put cash in. I think there's two ways to interpret this. One is potentially that if you're going through a hard time, you open the Book of Mormon, you're turning to like, oh, maybe this religious text will help me. I feel like finding a 20 is going to feel like a sign from God that you're meant to be reading the book. So if I'm analyzing this from more of like a critical point of view, I'm like, is this God manipulation into making people think like, oh, God is trying to tell me a sign that I should become Mormon because I found money in the Book of Mormon? The more hospitable interpretation of this is that people are like, oh, if they're opening a copy of the Book of Mormon, they might need the help. Maybe they're going through a hard time, so I want to help them have like a little pick me up or something. Either way, whatever the intentions are, apparently this also happens with the Bible. I found multiple comments of people saying that they always look through Bibles left behind in public spaces or like in hotel rooms because they typically find money that Christians or Mormons or whatever they leave in these books. Now, asking yourself why there's a Book of Mormon in your side table is just one of many questions that may run through your mind on any given day. Like, you may find yourself wondering whatever happened to that doctor's appointment you were supposed to be making. Or maybe it's that overdue dental cleaning or the annual checkup that's been years in the making. You may also wonder about the appointment you should make with your dermatologist about that weird thing on your skin that you keep wondering about. Let's get that appointment booked today, and you can do it entirely online while I'm talking to you with today's sponsor, ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and find doctors that are in network and high quality, and you can even book your appointment in the app. ZocDoc lets you filter providers by specialty, distance, accepted insurance, patient ratings, and more. Once you find the right doctor, you can see what appointments they have available. You can also get appointments fast, often within 24 to 72 hours. Sometimes you can even find same-day appointments with the doctor of your choice. If you're like me, you simply do not have time to call a million different doctor's offices looking for an appointment, and that's why ZocDoc is so amazing, because it allows you to care for your health on your schedule. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/Grenfell to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/Grenfell, ZocDoc.com/Grenfell. And my final submission into I found a Book of Mormon at Marriott, I have this video.
You left the church. Why can't you leave the church alone? Well, I'm on a trip in Mexico, and who's not leaving who alone now, huh?
Yeah, I feel like this kind of speaks to my point about having a religion insert itself into your experience in a private setting where you're expecting to relax and enjoy yourself and not feel like you're maybe subtly being preached to. I do feel like members often say, you know, why do you make these videos? Can't you just leave us alone, leave us in peace? You can leave the church, but you can't leave the church alone, that kind of a thing. But it does feel like whether it's stunts like having a Book of Mormon in your hotel drawer or sending, for example, 84,000 missionaries across the globe to come knock on your door and DM you and get up in your space to say, hey, you're not living the right way. You need to repent. You need to not drink coffee. You need to get married in the temple. You need to long list of rules. It doesn't exactly feel like they are practicing what they preach when they say, just let people believe what they want. You're literally not letting people believe what they want when you are knocking on their door, approaching them in private places, and trying to preach the gospel. That's kind of the opposite. Proselyting is the opposite of leaving people alone. Now, along with this, so like I said, the money thing was new to me. I'm gonna use that trick in the future though and see if I find anything. But along with this idea of the Book of Mormon in the side table, another common thing that members will do is do something called write your testimony in the Book of Mormon. And I'll put some screenshots off to the side here of examples of this. This is something I did countless times as a member of the church. I remember even once when we made aid packages, this was, I believe, packages meant for refugees, we included a copy of the Book of Mormon in every single aid package. And one of my youth activities was to write my testimony in every single Book of Mormon. You know, my hands cramping by the end because I'm writing my testimony over and over again for all of these different kits so that every single kit gets not just a Book of Mormon, but a Book of Mormon with a testimony written inside about how it's a life-changing book. The Book of Mormon generally is just a huge aspect of the Mormon religion. It's often referred to as the keystone of the religion. Basically, if you remove the keystone, everything crumbles around it. And even as a missionary, we would usually lead with the Book of Mormon. Can we read you a scripture about Jesus? So much of the church's literature, so much of the beliefs of the church is propped up by the Book of Mormon. Another famous quote from a Mormon leader is him saying that if someone wants to leave the church, they'll have to go under, over, or around the Book of Mormon because the evidence of its truthfulness is so complete and so in-depth that to leave the church, you basically have to turn your back on the most correct book on earth. I do have an entire video about the Book of Mormon and about all of the reasons why it's simply, no archaeologist, no historian, no scholar has ever agreed that the Book of Mormon is a nonfiction book, that the peoples described in the Book of Mormon are real people, that is, confirmed by science or archaeology or anything like that. There's anachronisms in the book. There's a lot of different ways you can dissect it to prove that it's simply a text that was created by Joseph Smith. All of that to say that even though those things are the case, even though people don't agree with the Mormon analysis that it's a nonfiction book about real ancient peoples, it's still a very important book to the religion. I honestly feel like as I was raised in the Mormon church, the Bible is kind of an afterthought. It's a side text. It's like the Robin, while the Book of Mormon is the Batman. It is important to the religion, I think, specifically because it teaches about what Jesus did while he was on the earth, but there's not a lot of focus on it. So on my husband's mission in Sweden, he was actually reprimanded at one point from teaching from the Bible too much because they said, you're supposed to teach mostly from the Book of Mormon. The Bible is a supporting document, but we don't know if it was translated correctly. The belief is that the Bible was corrupted over time because of too many translations. And so this means that the Bible is faulty, and the Book of Mormon, like I said, is literally known as the most correct book on earth. And so I think this is the core part of why the Book of Mormon shows up in every Marriott, is that it's such a major and important part of the religion. When I was growing up and we would discuss this idea of the Book of Mormon being in Marriott's hotel rooms, the idea around this was basically that someone would be alone in a hotel room, they're depressed, they're anxious, they're stressed, whatever. They open their side table and inside they see the Book of Mormon. And based on this lore, or this kind of manufactured idea of what would happen, this sad person might decide on a whim to open the Book of Mormon, and they would immediately be overcome with this like complete revelation that this is a book of God, it's a book of Jesus, and that this feeling that they would get just from even opening the book, like when I was growing up, it was like even seeing the book could inspire someone to join the church, because it was that powerful and that alluring. And so when they would get this overwhelming feeling upon seeing it or reading through it, they would immediately have to learn more. They would try to contact the missionaries. They would try to go to a church, and they would get baptized. I believed in this idea so strongly that I would always carry a copy of the Book of Mormon in my backpack. Before putting it in my backpack, I would write my testimony in the front. I've been putting a few images to the side here of what that looks like. So to write your testimony in the Book of Mormon, it would be something like, "Dear reader, this book has changed my life. This book has been a transformative way for me to draw closer to Jesus. I testify of its truthfulness. I know that if you read it, you'll also have the same feelings I have felt about this book. I invite you to pray about this book. Here's a specific story about the way it's changed my life." You'd write your whole testimony, and then at the end, "In the name of Jesus Christ, amen." And so based off of that trend of Mormons writing their testimonies in the front of a Book of Mormon, ex-Mormons have their own trend, which is to write their ex-Mormon testimony inside of the cover of a Book of Mormon. And you can also find a lot of images like this online. Here's an example. You can see at the top that someone wrote their testimony, "I believe the church is true, this book will change your life," etc. And then at the bottom, someone went in to say, "Actually, here's another hot take. Here's the other side of this story." And I think that this ex-Mormon testimony trend is very interesting. And as I said earlier, I have a separate Patreon video. And so in honor of my Mormon Marriott YouTube video, I figured I'd go into a Marriott and write my own ex-Mormon testimony in the cover of a Book of Mormon. So to read a bit of their ex-Mormon testimony in this case, they said, "To whoever is reading this, I have also read this book and I had a different experience. While I'm happy for Paul, Pat, IDK, I want to point out that this specific religion has caused so many people pain, myself included." He goes on to say, "I was baptized at 8 years old, raised in the church, and pariahed because I am gay. These people hurt me beyond comprehension and ultimately led me to consider suicide. I was lucky enough to tell the tale, but I wouldn't have survived if I didn't leave. I want you to know that the truth is subjective and we shouldn't rely on others to define it for us." And so I'll link to the rest. He just has a few more sentences after that. But I think this counter narrative that ex-Mormons provide is very important. Obviously, that's a major reason for my channel, because I think often the PR version of the church, the version of the church the missionaries share, isn't really what is beneath the surface. In many ways, I think when people first come across Mormons, they see the happy, smiling families, they see the wealth and the business success, they see the missionaries and their clean-cut look with the Book of Mormon and the name tags. But this traditional and faithful image often is not in line with the lived experience of what I share, what this person is sharing, the pain that they experience as a result of being a part of this church, the harm caused by a lot of the messages, whether it's teachings about what it means to be a woman or being gay, or all of the other examples I've shared on my channel of instances in which the church has caused harm. I also found this video, this is in Spanish, but he basically opens the side table and in it he begins to write his ex-Mormon testimony, and he writes it in English and in Spanish. As you can see here, as he's writing, he says, "If you want more information about the church, go to cesletter.org. And this was a major website/document that helped me untangle and understand my religion. It's common to see ex-Mormons write CES letter in faithful places. I saw one where they wrote CES letter inside of a locker at a temple. That's a common thing to write inside of the cover of a Book of Mormon. And if you're interested in my content, if you've enjoyed learning more about the what I consider to be the real history of the Mormon Church and a lot of the reasons people criticize the church. The CES letter is a great place to start. It's available online. You don't have to purchase anything. Just click through. It's a PDF, so it's pretty succinct. It's not like you have to read an entire textbook in order to read through all of the criticisms of the truth claims. Anyways, just to say that if someone is saying, if you want more information about the church, go to cesletter.org, they're probably an ex-Mormon who wants you to know the real history of the church and the real criticisms against the church, whether it's Joseph Smith's polygamy or errors in the translation of the Book of Mormon. It's all very easy to digest and understand through the CES letter. I think an interesting element of the Mormon Marriott story is that their connection with the church goes past the Book of Mormon. I think that's probably just one of the most well-known instances of how Marriott is tied up with the Mormon church. But there are other instances of times when the Mormon belief system and the Marriott Corporation had some sort of a conversation about how things should be done. A couple of major examples of this is the decision to provide alcohol within the hotel. We'll read this article in a bit, which is basically about how Marriott literally went to the actual prophet of the church and asked for his advice on if they should allow or provide alcohol. Another instance is the decision to provide adult entertainment within the rooms. There's an article about that and how the decision to provide it ultimately led to some backlash against Mitt Romney in one of his presidential runs. I think all of this is tied up in how Mormons do preach a form of prosperity doctrine. This is basically the idea that God blesses those he loves more, and if you are less righteous, you have less blessings, like monetary or physical blessings. And why often people ask me in comments, like, why do Mormons seem so rich? I think it's because some of the most famous and most elevated Mormons are rich, even within the church. I feel like almost every bishop or leader I ever had was wealthy. And so I think the response to the reason why Marriott went forward with providing some of these more sinful elements of the hotel experience lies in the idea that kind of like money is the most important thing. It's okay to do something as long as you're getting money for it. This is like a permissible opportunity to be adjacent to sin. As I already said at the beginning, Marriott is the largest hotel chain. I wanted to figure out just how many copies of the Book of Mormon that means are out there in hotel rooms. According to this report, Marriott has 1.7 million hotel rooms, so that's definitely a large number and a lot of copies. Usually when Marriott acquires a new hotel chain, they write specifically into the contract that part of the contractual franchise agreement is that there will be Bibles and copies of the Book of Mormon in the hotel rooms. This report also estimates there's 577,000 rooms that will come online soon, so that will be over 2 million rooms by the time all of this estimated growth happens. What I did find in reading through some of these articles is that there are certain hotel chains that they have not required copies of the Book of Mormon to be in. I'll also say a common debate is like how to say the plural of copies of the Book of Mormon. And there's like a whole scene from a Mormon comedy about this. Is it Books of Mormon, Books of Mormon, Book of Mormons? And technically the correct verbiage is copies of the Book of Mormon. And just like the name of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it's like such a mouthful that it's just too much. So a few hotels that do not have the copies of the Book of Mormon, we have AC Hotel, Protea, Moxie, and Edition do not have Bibles and copies of the Book of Mormon. I tried to do the math on this. Moxie has 30,000 rooms. Edition has 4,000 rooms about. You can see in this report I've already been referencing, you can see how many rooms are available under each franchise. Just to get a rough estimate based off of who doesn't have the copies and who does, based on my math, this is my napkin math. I didn't actually talk to a representative for this, but even with those hotel chains not providing copies of the Book of Mormon, we still have about 95% of Marriott hotel rooms providing a Book of Mormon. So it's still like most of them. In this article, there is a statement about why some of the rooms don't have the copies. And it says, it's because the religious books don't fit the personality of the brands, said Marriott spokeswoman, explaining that the Moxie and Edition hotels are geared toward fun-loving millennials. And so I think the implication there is so funny, which is that like religion isn't fun and it's like a downer. So they don't put the religious texts in the hotels that are meant to be geared towards people who want to have fun. It also says among the reasons for the change, they have a need to appeal to younger American travelers who are less devout than their parents or grandparents, and to avoid offending international travels such as Muslims or Buddhists. And so based on my research, all hotels generally are moving away from providing religious texts, basically because America is becoming less religious overall. However, even though Marriott isn't putting them in every single room, they are still putting them in more rooms than most hotel chains. We've now reached the point where I'm going to call a few different Marriott hotels, and I'm just going to ask them simply, why do you have the Book of Mormon in your hotel? Also, before I make the calls, a quick disclaimer that I'm going to change the voices of the people who respond. This is purely because I just don't want to get anyone in trouble based off of like if they had a good response or not. This is obviously calling people in their place of work. This is really what they said with a voice changer, purely because I just don't want to, I don't want to get anyone in trouble if they didn't have the right response or something. So if the voices sound a bit different, now you know. I'll also put captions down below in case it's a little difficult to understand what they're saying, but let's jump into the phone calls. I also figured I'd try calling Marriotts in different locations. So I like my theory is that maybe the Marriott in Utah will be more excited to talk about this than the Marriott in New York. So we're going to start with the Marriott in New York and work our way through New York, Utah, and then we'll try one in Texas, which is where I live.
Hello, you have reached the New York Marriott. To ensure each guest call is routed to the appropriate representative, please listen closely to the following 5 options. To speak with a hotel representative, please press 5.
Thank you for calling New York Marriott Services. How may I assist you?
Hi, I was calling. I just have a quick question. I know you guys have copies of the Book of Mormon in your hotels, and I was wondering why that is. Okay, so he hung up on me. All right, so no response. So first metric, just hang up. I don't, there's not a lot I can go off of based off of that. They hung up on me. So obviously New York, I guess, does not want to talk about it. Now we're going to try a Marriott in Utah.
This call may be recorded.
Good afternoon, and thank you for calling the Marriott. This is Eva at your service. How may I help?
Talk to a representative.
Good afternoon. Thank you for contacting the front desk at the Marriott. This is Jonathan at your service.
Hi, I was calling because I recently found out that Marriott has a copy of the Book of Mormon in their different rooms, and I was wondering why that is.
So you're just curious why they're in the rooms, or?
Yeah, just curious, like the reason why.
I think it was just something that was offered when Marriott first got out. I don't really know the other reason beyond that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Of course. Have a good one.
Oh, well, so he didn't hang up on me. To me, I took that response as like a very honest, like, oh, I think this was just part of the founding. Can't really speak to anything past that. So that's our second Utah data point. Not like a strong explanation, but just, yep, it's just something we do. But I don't know. It's interesting because this has to be something that costs the Marriott Foundation thousands of dollars, especially if it's 95% of the hotel rooms and there's like 1.7 million rooms. But So far, there doesn't seem to be like a united message around like, hey, here's what to say about this. Though that person, I'm grateful to that person for at least responding. So we're gonna end by trying out a Marriott in Texas. I'm gonna guess that we're gonna either get probably the same thing where it's like, I don't really know, I can't really speak to this.
Thank you for calling Marriott. Please hold for assistance.
Good afternoon. Thank you for calling Marriott. How may I help you?
Hi, I'm just calling with a random question. I recently found out that Marriott has a copy of the Book of Mormon in the different hotels rooms, and I was wondering if you could explain why they put that in there.
I cannot. I do not know. So I think, no, I don't want to give false information.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I maybe because they want to like respect, different religions. Maybe be the King James version of the Bible, and then also that.
Yeah.
But yes, ma'am. I don't want to give false information though.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. I was just curious if I called, if somebody could explain, but yeah, no pressure to answer if yeah.
I'm so sorry. But that is a great question, and I will be investigating this. So if I get that question again, I will be more knowledgeable about the answer.
Well, I really appreciate it, and thank you, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thanks, bye. So that person gave me the best, or at least most complete answer. I also appreciate her being like, I don't want to say it wrong, but I also want to, answer your question. I feel like the New York hanging up, as someone who lived in New York for 2 years, that was the most New York response that you could imagine of someone just being like, I'm not dealing with this today. The Texas hotel, really both of them tried to give me an answer. I think what this leaves me wondering is like, if I had tried to make these phone calls in the 70s or 80s, if there would have been a more cohesive brand response when J.W. Marriott was still alive and was still very much leading the company. And I think Mormonism was a little bit more baked into the company. I think now it's so corporate. I think it's just so interesting that they have this very specific plan, and they're putting a Book of Mormon in the rooms. If they acquire a new hotel chain, they're saying, hey, the Book of Mormon and the Bible are going to be in your rooms, but they're not maybe educating any of the service workers as to why. The responses seemed mostly to be like, oh, like, I'll answer based off of my own logic and my general knowledge of the company, but I'm not going to read a statement. I'm not going to give a response. Had I asked something like, can I smoke in the hotel rooms? I'm sure that they would have a very clear response of, this is what you say when someone asks this question. And I like that the woman at the end was like, I'm gonna do some research because I appreciate that, she was very helpful. So anyways, I do think it's interesting though, that even though they have this massive effort to put a Book of Mormon in every room, I even saw a TikTok video of a girl who she worked as a cleaner for Marriott, and she explained that that was part of their job. She said that every time she would clean a room, she would go check the books. She would make sure they weren't defaced. She said sometimes people had written in them or ripped pages out or whatever, so she would have to replace them, or, she would basically check to make sure the book was where it was supposed to be and in the condition it was meant to be in. And that this was basically part of her checklist of items that, as part of going into the rooms and getting everything ready for the next guest, she would check in on the Book of Mormon and the Bible. And so it's just interesting to me that they still put so much manpower behind getting the copies in the room, making sure that the copies are where they're supposed to be, but there's not any other aspect of the hotel that really seems to rally around that idea. It's like this little orphan, this little vestige of like, we used to be a Mormon company, but nothing else around it, whether it's the training of the employees or messaging on the website, is still head nodding toward the church in the way that putting a Book of Mormon in a side table is like a major head nod to the church. Now that we've made our phone calls and looked at a little bit of TikTok and Instagram, I figured I'd share a little bit more of the history behind the Marriotts and how it's connected to the Mormon church. I did think it was interesting that J.W. Marriott was born in Marriott, Utah. Obviously, that means that this family has been big in the church for a long time, well before any hotels were made. This reminds me of Porterville. My first ancestors to join the church had the last name Porter. He came over with the Saints and founded Porterville, and he was also a polygamist. And so it's just very interesting how some of these old Mormon names are so well established in the church that portions of Utah, like small towns or whatever, were literally named after these founding Mormon families. As I said, J.W. Marriott was in a big Mormon family. He served a mission. His first business was a root beer company, which I thought was kind of funny. And then he later turned it into something called the Hot Shop, where he also served like food and things like that. A story I came across in this article was that he was late to his own wedding because he was trying to start a business or get business funding, and that his wife was just like, okay, I'll still have you. And I feel like that also seemed like a very Mormon story to me, where like weddings are not very important, and it's like you just go to the church building after and have a little punch, and nowhere near the level of party or celebration that a typical wedding has, like a non-Mormon wedding that I've been to. I feel like Mormon weddings are kind of like the same as when kids are born in the church. It's like it's like, yeah, good for you. All right, back to what we were doing. You know, even just like posing it as like, oh, he was such a good businessman. He cared more about that than like showing up to his wedding on time. I don't know. That just, I feel like if you go read it, which I'll put the snippet off to the side here, I feel like it's said in almost like this very braggadocious, complimentary way. And I'm just like, the idea that we're celebrating a man for being late to his own wedding. Okay. The first ever hotel opened by Marriott was in 1957. This was the Twin Bridges Motor Hotel in Arlington, Virginia. From what I can tell, that the first ever hotel also had a copy of the Book of Mormon in every room. So this is a tradition that goes all the way back to their first hotel, which was founded in the 50s. I also mentioned earlier that there are other ways in which Mormon doctrine potentially was a difficulty when trying to start a hotel chain. There's two main examples I was going to highlight. So the first is providing alcohol within the hotel. According to this article, it says the first 3 hotels had been built in Virginia and Texas, which were dry states. Pennsylvania, on the other hand, was a wet state that allowed the sale of alcohol in hotels except on Sundays. So this provides a bit of a question: to do or not to do? J.W. agonized over this decision with his discussions with Bill, that's his son, who had no similar misgivings. Bill was just like, let's make the money. Bill advised JW to consult with church leadership, so he got to talk to President David O. McKay, which I thought was also crazy and shows, like, if you're rich and I think well known within the church, you get access to leadership and to this like special opportunity that the general membership would not have been allowed to have. So he literally, J.W. Marriott literally goes to the prophet to say, should I sell alcohol in my establishments? According to this article, the prophet said, as I see it, Brother Marriott, if you don't satisfy your customers' wants and needs, you could be running the same risk. If liquor today is an essential part of the service that the hotel and restaurant industry offers to its patrons, it seems to me that you're obligated to sell it to them. I don't know if you are actually. You could have given other advice, but he chose not to. To sell it to them doesn't mean that we approve of drinking any more than to sell a gun means the approval of the using that gun to commit a crime. I don't know if David O. McKay was just like, if you sell alcohol, we get 10% of the income that you get from having a great business. I do think that this also feeds back into this prosperity doctrine thing, and is a common question even why Ballerina Farm doesn't wear her garments, or like anytime anyone is like, well, why is this rule not that big of a deal in Mormonism? when it comes to making money. And I've shared this before. There's like, Mormons will say, well, the ox is in the mire, so I can work on Sunday because Jesus said that sometimes you just have to do things. And usually the reason for the workaround is often because of money, which is interesting because when I a few weeks ago, I did a reaction video with ex-JW Panda Tower, and it seems that in Jehovah's Witnesses' minds, in their doctrine, it's a lot more like there's no exceptions. There's no exceptions to any of these rules. Them's the breaks. Like he shared, I guess there was a magazine through the Watchtower that is literally celebrating when children decide not to get blood transfusions and so as a result pass away. So these children are being celebrated by this religion as warriors for God, for choosing to die rather than get a blood transfusion. It's crazy to me because it seems like, at least hearing from a Jehovah's Witness, they're a lot less into the loopholes, whereas Mormons, there's a lot more opportunities to be like, well, we can sell alcohol because you're not going to be successful otherwise, and selling alcohol isn't the same as endorsing it, even though like I think most common sense would say like, I think selling it is a little bit of an endorsement, right? Like, I mean, if you're fully abstaining from alcohol, having it in the hotel, selling it, like to me, reading into David O. McKay, it seems more like he's like, well, making money is more important than not providing alcohol. Like having a strong business is more important than choosing not to provide alcohol. And keep in mind, David O. McKay very well could have been like, dude, you already have like 3 hotels. I don't think you need more money. But rather than saying that, he was like, well, you gotta do what you gotta do. Sell the booze, man. And arguably, it was a good business decision to sell alcohol. I don't know if Marriott would be what it is today if they had chosen to abstain, but it just shows that there are instances in which in a world of competing priorities, money is more important than having this like perfect squeaky clean image. This brings us to item number 2, which is adult content. So I actually have a really visceral, strong memory of my parent at one point basically complaining that Marriott was providing adult content for rent within like a pay-per-view setting within the hotels, and how like this was evidence of moral degradation and how could they do this. And it seems like by David O. McKay basically being like, give the people what they want, it set Marriott up for more business success at least, even though there's also more scrutiny from the devout membership like my family, or in the case of Mitt Romney, when he was running for president the first time, a huge criticism against him because Mitt Romney ran on a anti-porn / anti-adult content platform partially, and a lot of people criticized him for his stance because he was on the board of Marriott, and Marriott provided adult content in their hotel rooms. In this article, it said Romney caught a bit of flack last week because he spent nearly 10 years on the Marriott board, yet never tried to reverse the company's policy of providing pornography on demand, something J.W. Bill Marriott Jr. defended in 2000. We also have this quote: 2 weeks ago, probable Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney abruptly resigned from Marriott's board. In 2008, family values groups chastised Romney for failing to convince Marriott to de-porn its movie titles. And so I think it's interesting that we have this story about alcohol where David O. McKay, the prophet of the church, is saying, you got to do what you got to do. And then they take that into another sin, which is adult content in the rooms, but that's not met with the same level of acceptance that the alcohol was. In another instance of a clash between the church and Marriott's company values, in 2008, there was Prop 8. This was in California, basically trying to change the laws around gay marriage. And the Mormon church worked really hard, donated a lot of money, and also asked the members to donate a lot of money to fighting the passage of gay marriage in California specifically. And at this time, we have the same Bill Marriott. He publicly said neither he nor Marriott International contributed to the Prop 8 donations, and the company stayed neutral. And Marriott has also had campaigns around around gay travel and promoting like love is love and marketing to LGBTQ travelers. In that instance, we see another departure from Mormon doctrine and Mormon messaging, because rather than going down that same bigoted path of rejecting gay people, Marriott chose the opposite direction, which was to market to gay people, to say, hey, you're welcome at our hotels, and to not donate to Prop 8. On a lesser note, they obviously also have coffee available. There's even a Starbucks Marriott Bonvoy program where like you can get points and use it towards Starbucks or whatever. And so obviously coffee is just another thing on the list of them saying, well, if the customers want it, we should give it to them. I'd be interested if you could go back in time and if David O. McKay had said, nope, dude, alcohol is a sin. Why would you want to make money on alcohol? Then I'd be interested if we would have Marriott today. Mormons are obviously good at business, but it makes people scratch their heads sometimes, because I think it makes people wonder, well, if this is the standard, then why are you allowed to, why is Ballerina Farm allowed to wear a strapless dress? Well, ox is in the mire. Why can Marriott have adult content in their rooms? Well, give the people what they want. And it's like, I think it's why the church has billions of dollars, because I think the bottom line is always about money and less so about having a very dogmatic stance on like, we have to follow the rules, at least when money comes through the door. Even for changing, I talked about this in this video about the racist past of the church, and how a major reason that people point to as to why the church changed its stance around Black people having the priesthood or getting all of the temple ordinances is because they might have lost their tax exempt status. A few years before the Mormon Church changed their stance on Black people having the priesthood, another religious university, non-Mormon, just a Christian university, had lost its tax exempt status based off of discrimination. The Mormon Church was basically seeing that and being like, hey, if we don't change our stance, we stand to lose a lot of money by having to pay back taxes and losing our tax exempt status. And so I do feel like the Achilles heel of the Mormon Church and Mormon doctrine is money. As soon as money enters the door, it's like, well, we don't need to take that rule that seriously. I also talked about this prosperity doctrine in my MLM video, how Mormons are very susceptible to get rich quick schemes and schemes that prey off of person-to-person relationships, like, hey, I'm in your congregation and you should try this essential oils brand. And I think the desire to have money is very strong, especially amongst Utah Mormons, where prosperity doctrine and the prosperity culture is so pervasive, and you live on the same street as everyone in your congregation and you can see how big their house is and who just got the new car. And I feel like it really feeds into this idea that the more wealthy you are, the more God is blessing you and the more righteous you are. I also think this is why McMansions are so popular in Utah, because it's not really about the quality of the build. It's not about the, high quality materials, or it's like, how big can we make it on as little money as possible? Because a big ass house really easily communicates success. I saw another video recently where she was like, why are all of the houses in Utah just like made of sticks? And I think it's because the bigness of the house is what's desirable, not the quality of the house. And so McMansions, I think, are a dime a dozen in Utah because they just want the square footage. I do think it seems like the company has slowly but surely become less Mormon as it goes from having a full ownership and focus of the family, the Marriott family specifically, and it's gone more into a corporate controlled business. Basically, after the founder J.W. Marriott stepped down, his son Bill took over the day-to-day operations. This is J.W. Bill Marriott Jr., quite the mouthful, but basically he fully retired from the board in 2022. The board chair is David Marriott, which is Bill's son. So we do still have the family operating at a high level within the company. If he's the board chair, he's obviously still very high up, but the CEO is not a member of the church. He seems to just be like a corporate CEO who is a smart dude and probably got the position because he's done this type of job before, but not because of nepotism, not because of his family, and also not even because he's part of the religion. I also found this article interesting. This is from another one of the family members. Basically, he got cut off. I think the article, if I'm interpreting it, he got cut off because he wasn't like Mormon enough. The church comes up a lot in this article. He's not one of the he's not a key founder or one of the key figures, so I didn't go super in depth into his story, but I do think it's interesting how often the church comes up as, hey, if you're not being a good Mormon boy, hey, if you're not doing your mission, if you're not squeaky clean, you're cut off. So definitely recommend reading this article. I feel like him as a figure was tangential enough. I decided not to go too deep down the rabbit hole of his story, but I'll link it below because I do think his account of how many times the Mormon image was held up to him as basically like, hey, if you're not like this, you're not part of the family fully, felt very true to my experience as a black sheep myself. To read one part of the article, it says, in the lawsuit, John says his dad told him he needed to get married by the time he finished college and that he'd rather his son come home in a pine box rather than engage in premarital sex. And so I think the Book of Mormon in the side table is probably the last remaining vestige of just how mega Mormon the Marriott's founding was. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Like I said, if you haven't already, I'd love it if you guys drop some comments on your experience seeing a Book of Mormon in a Marriott or maybe just in the wild in general. Let me know if this whole like finding money in scriptures is a real thing. It sounds like this is happening with the Bible too. So sounds like if you need some cash, just like flip through the religious books that may or may not be nearby. If you want to keep the party going, you can check out my Patreon video where I wrote my ex-Mormon testimony inside of a Book of Mormon at a Marriott. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you all next week.